What if I told you that you know nothing about the lives of Native Americans and how they survived the coldest nights? They lived on the Great Plains, where temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. All around them was endless snow and howling winds, capable of freezing everything alive in a matter of minutes. In such conditions, without modern technology, heating, or thermal underwear, survival seems impossible. The indigenous peoples of North America did not just survive in this icy hell, they lived, slept, and dreamed, keeping their homes warm and cozy. Their methods were the result of thousands of years of observation and a deep understanding of the laws of nature. It was a whole science where every element, from the shape of the dwelling to the material of the clothing, played a crucial role. Watch the video to the end to learn how Native Americans turned fur and smoke into a perfect heating system, and why sleeping together was not a tradition, but a vital survival strategy. What if I told you that everything you knew about the teepee wasn't entirely true? For most people, it's just a cone made of animal skins, a primitive dwelling. But in fact, the teepee is one of the most perfect mobile structures ever created by man, a true machine for survival in extreme conditions. Its conical shape was not accidental. It provided incredible stability against the hurricane-force winds of the Great Plains. While other structures broke and collapsed, the smooth slopes of the teepee allowed the wind to flow around them without causing damage. This was the first and main secret of its reliability. But the real genius was hidden in the details. At the top of the teepee were two smoke vents, similar to wings. With the help of special poles, they could be turned depending on the direction of the wind, creating the perfect draft for the fire. This system worked like an extractor fan in a modern kitchen. It effectively removed smoke, preventing it from accumulating inside the dwelling. Thanks to this, it was always easy to breathe inside, and the fire burned evenly and cleanly. Inside the teepee, an additional lining of finely crafted skins was often installed. It was attached to the frame at a certain distance from the main covering. This created an air gap that worked on the principle of a modern thermos. Cold air entering from below under the edge of the outer covering rushed upward through this air gap and exited through the smoke holes. It did not enter the living space, creating a kind of thermal curtain. Inside, a warm and cozy microclimate was maintained. The floor in a teepee was never just bare earth. It was covered with skins and sometimes with special woven mats. This provided additional insulation from the frozen ground. We would love to hear your opinion. What do you think about such complex engineering in what seems to be a simple dwelling? Write about it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the new video. Want to know the secret that turned a simple dwelling into a warm home? At the center of each teepee or wigwam was a hearth, its hot heart. But it was not just a fire for heating, but a carefully organized space, subject to its own laws and rituals. The hearth was located strictly in the center, directly under the smoke vents. This ensured optimal air circulation and effective smoke removal. The fire heated the space evenly, creating a comfort zone around it. Only certain types of wood were used for the fire. Preference was given to hardwoods such as oak or maple, which burned slowly and gave off a lot of heat. Conifers, which smoked heavily and shot sparks, were avoided. One of the most effective techniques was the so-called long fire. Several logs were laid parallel to each other, and the fire did not burn along the entire length at once, but slowly moved from one end to the other. Such a fire could maintain heat throughout the night without the need to constantly add wood. A heat circle formed around the hearth, an invisible boundary that divided the living space. The places for cooking and working were located closest to the fire. Further away in the zone of gentle warmth were the sleeping places. Maintaining the fire was an important responsibility. It was never left unattended or allowed to go out on a cold night. It was a constant, methodical task on which the life of the entire family depended. The fire was not only a source of heat, but also the center of social life. People gathered around it in the evenings, told stories, and did crafts. It brought people together and created a feeling of safety and comfort in the middle of a cold night. But even the most perfect tepee was only a shell. The real heart of the winter dwelling was its fiery engine, and in the next chapter, we will reveal the secrets of controlling it. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of survival in the cold. The modern concept of layering in clothing is not a new invention. Native Americans perfected this principle thousands of years before the advent of synthetic materials, creating a veritable armor against the cold. The basis of this system was clothing made from finely tanned hides, mainly deer. This material was soft, durable, and most importantly, breathable. It prevented the body from overheating and wick away moisture, which was critical for survival. The first inner layer often consisted of a shirt and leggings. They were sewn with the fur on the inside, creating a soft and warm air layer directly against the skin. This layer was responsible for retaining the body's own heat. The second layer was looser and served as the main insulation. These could be tunics or dresses. The loose fit allowed air to circulate, creating additional insulating layers. Outerwear consisted of loose capes or robes, most often made of bison hides. These hides retained thick, dense fur, which was an unmatched insulator. Such a robe was not just clothing, but a personal shelter. The principle was simple. Several layers of thin clothing kept you warmer than one thick layer. The air trapped between the layers served as an ideal insulator. This system made it easy to regulate body temperature by removing or adding layers depending on activity and weather. Special attention was paid to protecting the feet. Moccasins were sewn from several layers of leather and insulated on the inside with rabbit fur or other soft materials. In winter, they were worn with high gaiters that protected the shins from snow. This clothing system was so effective that it allowed people to stay out in the bitter cold for hours. It was the result of a deep understanding of the physics of heat and the properties of natural materials. Every detail, every seam was in its place and served its purpose. Are you ready to learn the truth about what Native Americans slept on? The sleeping area in a winter dwelling was not just a place to rest, but a carefully designed structure. Its main purpose was to insulate from the icy ground, which was the main source of cold at night. In tipis, sleeping areas were located along the perimeter, along the walls. They were often low platforms woven from willow twigs. This allowed the bed to be raised above the cold floor and ensured the circulation of warm air. The base of the bed was a thick layer of pine or spruce branches. This springy and fragrant mattress served several purposes at once. It provided softness and, most importantly, created a powerful insulating layer that did not allow the cold from the ground to penetrate. Several layers of skins were laid on top of the branches. The bottom layer consisted of coarse but thick bison skins, which served as additional insulation. They were a kind of waterproof sheet against the cold. The upper layers, on which people slept directly, were made of softer and thinner skins. These could be deer or bear skins, tanned to a velvety texture. They were pleasant to the touch and retained heat well. The same bison robes that served as outerwear were used as blankets. Their thick fur created a cozy cocoon in which one could sleep comfortably even in the most severe frosts. Sometimes several skins were sewn together to make a large blanket for the whole family. Pillows stuffed with soft grass or bird down were placed under their heads. Sometimes a small piece of wood wrapped in soft fur was used as a pillow. Everything was designed to create maximum comfort. But clothing alone was not enough to survive the freezing night. In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans built their sleeping places, turning the cold ground into a warm nest. In many indigenous cultures, especially those who lived in large communal houses such as the Iroquois longhouses, sleeping together was the norm. This was dictated not only by social reasons, but also by purely practical ones. Collective warmth was a powerful tool for survival. The Iroquois longhouse was a huge structure that could house several dozen people. It was impossible to heat such a space with only fires. The main source of heat at night was the people themselves. Sleeping places in longhouses were located on multi-tiered platforms along the walls. Families slept together, in close contact with each other. This significantly reduced the heat loss of each individual. The principle is simple. The more heat sources are gathered in one place, the slower they cool down. Several people sleeping under one large blanket made of animal skins created a stable microclimate around themselves. Their combined heat warmed the space under the blanket much more effectively than the heat of one person alone. Even in the small tepee of the Plains Indians, families often slept together. This was especially important on the coldest nights when the fire in the hearth died down towards morning. The warmth of loved ones was the last line of defense against the encroaching frost. This approach also saved resources. Instead of providing each person with a separate set of warm skins, several large blankets could be used for the whole family. This was important in conditions where every skin counted. Sleeping together also strengthened social ties within the community. It created a sense of unity, security, and mutual dependence. It was the physical embodiment of the idea that survival was only possible together. Sleeping together was an integral part of winter life. It demonstrated a deep understanding of the laws of thermodynamics and the importance of collective action. It was another brick in the complex survival system of Native Americans. What if I showed you a time machine? We often think that the main cold comes from outside, through the walls. But Native Americans knew that an equally insidious enemy was the frozen ground beneath their feet, which drew heat away relentlessly and constantly. Therefore, great attention was paid to preparing the floor in a dwelling. The first step was often to remove the top layer of soil. A shallow pit for a hearth was dug in the center of the future dwelling, and the rest of the surface was carefully leveled. In some cultures, especially among tribes living on plateaus, it was common to build semi-dugouts. The dwelling was partially sunk into the ground, taking advantage of its natural insulating properties. The walls of such a house were protected from the wind, and the earthen floor was below the freezing level. In teepees, which were mobile and did not require digging pits, floor insulation was achieved by other methods. The entire floor was carefully covered with a layer of dry grass or moss. This layer created the first barrier against the cold. Woven mats made of reeds or other plant materials were laid on top of the grass. They were dense and durable, creating a smooth and clean surface. The mats also had good thermal insulation properties. Only on top of this multi-layered cake were skins spread out. Thus, there were several layers of insulation between the sleeping person and the icy ground. This significantly reduced heat loss. A ridge of earth or snow was often placed around the edge of the dwelling, at the base of the walls. This was done to seal the gap between the Tipi covering and the ground. This simple measure effectively protected against drafts. In particularly harsh winters, snow was used as additional insulation. The outside of the teepee was covered with a high snowdrift. Snow, thanks to its porous structure, is an excellent heat insulator and reliably protected the lower part of the dwelling from the wind. This meticulous work of insulating the floor was no less important than building the walls. It showed that in the struggle for warmth, there are no trifles. Every element of the survival system had to work flawlessly. The warmth of their bodies heated the air, but the main enemy lurked below. In the next chapter, we will talk about the invisible battle with permafrost and how they protected themselves from the cold coming from the ground itself. Survival in winter began long before the first snowfall. It began with choosing the right place for a winter camp. This strategic decision determined whether winter would be relatively comfortable or turn into a desperate struggle for survival. The ideal location for a winter camp had to meet several key requirements. First and foremost was protection from the wind. Camps were never set up on open, windswept plateaus. Preference was given to deep valleys, gorges, or places located in a river bend. Natural folds in the terrain served as a reliable shield from the icy winds. Dense forests were also excellent shelter. The second most important factor was the availability of fuel. In winter, a huge amount of firewood was needed to keep the fire going. Therefore, the camp was set up in close proximity to the forest, where dry, fallen trees could be found. The availability of a non-freezing water source was the third condition. This could be a fast-flowing stream that did not freeze over or a spring. Carrying water from far away through deep snow would be too labor-intensive. The location had to be safe from natural phenomena. Slopes where avalanches were possible and lowlands that could be flooded during a sudden thaw were avoided. The safety of the community was paramount. The choice of location was a collective decision made by the Council of Elders. The experience of previous years, stories from ancestors, and current observations were taken into account. A mistake in this matter could be very costly. Once the location was chosen, preparations began. Firewood was gathered, sites for dwellings were prepared, and food supplies were stockpiled. By the time the real cold weather arrived, the camp had to be fully ready. This foresight and ability to read the landscape were the keys to a successful winter. The Indians did not fight nature. They used its strengths for their protection. This was the essence of their wisdom. Staying warm is not only about protecting yourself from the cold outside, but also about producing internal heat. The human body is like a furnace that constantly needs fuel. The winter diet of Native Americans was perfectly balanced for maximum energy production. The basis of the winter diet was food high in fat and protein. Fat is the most concentrated fuel for the body. It is slowly absorbed and provides a lot of energy, which is used, among other things, to heat the body. The main source of such food was bison meat, especially for the tribes of the Great Plains. Bison meat is rich in protein, and subcutaneous fat in bone marrow provided the necessary calories. In the fall, they harvested a huge amount of meat to last the whole winter. One of the key products was pemmican. This ingenious invention was a mixture of dried and ground meat, melted fat, and sometimes dried berries. This high-energy paste could be stored for years without spoiling. Pemmican was the perfect survival food. A small piece could sustain a person for many hours. It was indispensable during winter travels or periods when fresh food was scarce. In addition to meat, the diet included nuts and seeds, which are also rich in fats and proteins. They were collected in the fall and stored in special containers. This was an important addition to the meat diet. In coastal and lake regions, fatty fish played a huge role. Salmon, lake trout, and other fish were preserved for future use. They were dried, cured, and smoked. Fish oil was another valuable source of energy. Thus, the fight against the cold was fought on two fronts, external and internal. Proper clothing and shelter protected against heat loss, while proper food ensured its constant production. Only such a comprehensive approach could guarantee survival. In the northernmost subarctic regions, where winter was particularly long and harsh, indigenous peoples such as the Cree and Athabascans used another ally in their fight against the cold. That ally was snow itself. They learned to build temporary shelters out of it, which saved the lives of hunters and travelers. The most famous type of such shelter is the quinzhee. Unlike an igloo, which requires special compressed snow blocks to build, a quinzhee can be built from almost any type of snow. This made it a versatile emergency shelter. Construction began with the creation of a large pile of loose snow. Many sticks of the same length, approximately 20 to 30 centimeters, were stuck into this pile. These sticks served as indicators of the thickness of the walls of the future shelter. Then the snow pile was given time to compact and bake a little. This process, called sintering, made the structure more durable. After that, they began to dig out the interior space. The entrance was made as low as possible so that warm air would not escape. The inner chamber was dug out until the ends of the control sticks were visible. This ensured that the walls were of equal and sufficient thickness. Inside the quinzhee, they created a sleeping platform that was higher than the entrance. Since cold air is heavier than warm air, it accumulated at the bottom in a kind of cold well. At the top, on the platform, the temperature was significantly higher. The walls made of compacted snow had remarkable thermal insulation properties. Even in the most severe frost outside, the temperature inside the quinzhee could remain around 0 degrees. The heat of the human body was sufficient to maintain this difference. A small hole was made in the ceiling for ventilation. It allowed carbon dioxide to escape and provided a supply of fresh air. Proper ventilation was critical for safety. Building a quinzhee required no tools other than your hands and possibly a shovel. This skill was part of the mandatory training of any hunter who went into the winter forest. The ability to build such a shelter meant the difference between life and freezing to death. This technology demonstrates the highest level of adaptation to the environment. People did not simply protect themselves from the snow. They took it and turned it into a reliable shelter. They used the properties of the cold itself to protect themselves from it. In addition to all the material tricks, there was another, perhaps the most important element of survival. It was intangible warmth, knowledge, skills, and psychological resilience passed down from generation to generation. Without this foundation, all technology would be useless. From an early age, children were taught to understand nature and its signs. They learned to recognize tree species, tracks in the snow, and predict the weather by the direction of the wind and the shape of the clouds. This knowledge was woven into myths, songs, and stories. Each member of the community knew their role in the overall system of survival. Men were responsible for gathering firewood and maintaining order. Women managed the household, prepared food, and took care of clothing and housing. There was a culture of mutual aid and collective responsibility. If one family ran out of supplies, others shared theirs. The understanding that survival was only possible together was the basis of the social structure. Winter was not perceived as a disaster or a curse. It was a natural part of the annual cycle, a time for rest, crafts, and spiritual practices. This psychological attitude helped people endure hardships without despair. People were taught patience and thrift. They knew how to stretch their food and firewood supplies for many months. Wastefulness in any form was considered a serious offense. Survival skills were honed constantly. The ability to quickly build a fire, construct a shelter, or find your way in a blizzard was all part of everyday life. It was not theory, but daily practice. The stories and legends told on long winter evenings were not only entertaining, but also educational. They contained important lessons about survival, morality, and the structure of the world in an allegorical form. This cultural and psychological preparation was the invisible force that allowed people to face winter without fear. They were armed not only with warm furs, but also with a deep confidence in their own abilities. This was their greatest asset. Ultimately, the secret to the survival of Native Americans lay in harmony. Harmony between the construction of their dwellings, their clothing system, their social organization, and their deep respect for the world in which they lived. All these elements worked as a single, well-coordinated mechanism. We can see that the survival of the indigenous peoples of North America in the harsh winter conditions was not the result of primitive instincts, but of a complex and highly developed system. Every element of this system, from the smoke vents in the tipis to the composition of pemmican, had been refined over centuries and perfected. It was a true science of warmth based on observation and a deep understanding of the laws of nature. They didn't just fight the cold, they learned to work with it, using its properties to their advantage. This story teaches us that the most effective solutions are often the simplest and most obvious. The main thing is to be able to see them and apply them correctly. What other aspects of Native American life and culture would you like to see in future videos? Suggest your topics in the comments because your interest helps us create new videos. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future explorations of the mysteries of the past.